It is easy to be loyal when things are hard, but true character is revealed when life becomes easy. After coming into wealth, he asked for a divorce from the woman who had been by his side through every struggle. But what he didn't realize was that his wife was guarding a secret so explosive, it would shake him to his core. The blazing Austin sun bore down on the cracked pavement of the strip mall parking lot as Natalie Parker fumbled with her keys, a stack of graded papers in one arm and a tepid coffee in the other. Her battered Mazda 3, a remnant of better financial days, sat baking in the Texas heat. As she neared the windshield, a flyer flapping beneath the wiper caught her attention. Dream big, start small, entrepreneurship seminar. Natalie's lips curled into a wistful smile. She knew exactly who needed to see this. "Dylan," she called out, pushing open the door to their small apartment. Inside, the air was thick and musty, a sharp contrast to the dry oven outside. Dylan Hughes, her husband of 3 years, was hunched over their thrift store dining table, surrounded by a mess of crumpled notes and half-drained energy drinks. He looked up, dark circles heavy under his eyes. "Hey, Nat. How was school?" Natalie's heart squeezed. Despite the fatigue, Dylan's youthful spark still flickered, reminding her of the wide-eyed dreamer she'd fallen in love with during undergrad. "Same as always," she said, setting her things down and crossing the room to kiss his forehead. "But I found something you might like." She handed him the flyer. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, the old connection between them sparked again. Dylan's eyes lit up as he read the paper. This could be it, Nat. The break we've been hoping for." Natalie nodded, her smile cautious. She'd seen this fire before, watched it blaze and sputter out more than once, but she couldn't let her own tiredness smother his hope. "I think so too, babe. You should go. I'll cover the registration." Dylan frowned. "But your classroom supply budget can wait," Natalie said, cutting him off gently but firmly. "Your dreams can't." As Dylan wrapped her in a grateful hug, whispering thank yous against her hair, Natalie allowed herself a moment of stillness. This was their reality, her steady support buoying his lofty aspirations. It wasn't flawless, but it was theirs. The next morning, Natalie stood in her classroom at East Austin High, the drone of the ancient AC unit doing little against the oppressive heat. She moved between desks, handing back essays to her junior economics students. "Remember," she said, her voice rising above the shuffle of paper, "economics isn't just about numbers. It's about understanding how the world works, how choices ripple out and affect entire communities." A hand shot up in the back. "Miss Parker, is that why you became a teacher instead of like a CEO or something?" The question threw Natalie off for a second. She paused, thoughts of her own college days flashing through her mind. The internships she'd passed up, the job offers she'd turned down, just to stay in Austin and support Dylan's dreams. "I became a teacher," she said carefully, "because I believe in the power of knowledge. And sometimes, helping others realize their potential is the most rewarding path of all." As the words left her mouth, Natalie felt their weight. Was she truly living up to that ideal? Or had she just settled, content to experience fulfillment through the successes of her students? The high-pitched ring of the bell pulled her out of her thoughts. As the students poured out, bubbling with excitement over their weekend plans, Natalie dropped into her chair with a soft sigh. She reached for her phone, her thumb hesitating over Dylan's name. Should she call him, ask how the seminar was going? No. He needed space, to grow, to figure things out without her always being there. Instead, she opened her banking app and winced at the numbers staring back at her. The registration fee for Dylan's seminar had been hefty but doable. What weighed heavier was the rent payment coming due, looming like a dark cloud. Somehow, they'd manage. They always did. But the never-ending tightrope of finances was wearing thin. As she packed up her bag, a folded piece of paper slipped from her planner. Natalie's breath caught when she saw the familiar handwriting. It was a letter from her father, written years ago, before he passed. She'd kept it tucked away like a lucky charm, rarely daring to unfold it. With trembling hands, she opened it now. "My dearest Natalie, I hope this letter finds you well and thriving. As I write, I feel immense pride for the woman you've become. Your kindness, your intellect, your quiet strength, they've always been your greatest gifts. I know you've chosen to walk beside Dylan to support his dreams, That's an admirable path, and it speaks to the depth of your character. But sweetheart, never forget, you are not just a supporting role in someone else's story. You are capable of leading your own. The world needs people like you. Not only as helpers, but as pioneers, as visionaries. Don't dim your own light while trying to keep someone else's burning. I've left something for you, not much, but enough to start something of your own. It's in an account under your maiden name. Use it wisely. Remember, investing in yourself is never selfish. You've always been my greatest pride. Live boldly, love deeply, never forget your worth. With all my love, Dad. Natalie folded the letter slowly, tears blurring her vision. She'd read it before, sure, but never had it struck her like this. She'd never touched the account, always saving it for some someday that never came. Driving home, the Austin skyline streaked past in a haze of sun-baked buildings and sprawling trees. Her mind spun. What would it really mean to choose herself? To stop living in Dylan's shadow and finally chase her own dreams? The thought exhilarated her and terrified her. Pulling into their apartment complex, she spotted Dylan's dented old truck already in its spot. Her heart sped up. How had the seminar gone? Would this finally be the breakthrough, or just another in a string of false starts? She found him in the cramped kitchen, a flurry of movement as he pulled things from their nearly empty fridge. "Nat," he beamed, face glowing with a kind of fire she hadn't seen in ages. "You won't believe it. The seminar, it was everything. I've got an idea, Nat, a real game changer." Natalie leaned against the doorframe, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Tell me everything," she said, doing her best to quiet the tangle of thoughts swirling in her mind. This was Dylan's moment, and she would be present for him, just as she always had been. He dove in, speaking animatedly about a new business concept, something centered around sustainable agriculture and vertical farming. As he spoke, Natalie's mind began to wander. She watched the way he moved, the sparkle in his eyes, the excitement that animated every word. It brought back the memories of the young man she fell in love with, the dreamer who saw possibility where others saw obstacles. But underneath the warmth in her chest, a small flicker began to burn. A quiet voice whispered, "What about your dreams, Natalie?" She pushed the thought aside, tuning back into Dylan's voice just as he said, "And with your background in economics, I know you could help me get this off the ground. What do you think, Nat? Are you in?" Natalie blinked. She'd missed a key part of what he'd just said. Of course, Dylan. I'm always here to support you." Dylan's face fell slightly. "No, Nat, I mean really in. As a partner, your skills, your knowledge, they're exactly what this needs to succeed." For a moment, Natalie was speechless. In all their years together, through every idea, every attempt, Dylan had never asked for an actual partnership. She had always been the supportive spouse, the one with the paycheck, the fallback. But a partner? I don't know what to say, she admitted, her thoughts spinning. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Dylan nodded, his excitement dimming just a little. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Nat," he said, reaching for her hands, "I really think this could be our shot, our chance to build something incredible together." Over dinner, a simple bowl of pasta with jarred sauce, a far cry from the meals Natalie once dreamed of preparing in a home they could barely afford. The air between them was heavy with silent questions and hope. That night, as Dylan slept peacefully beside her, Natalie lay wide-eyed, staring at the ceiling. The letter from her father felt like it was radiating from the drawer in her nightstand. She thought of the bank account he'd mentioned, the one she'd never touched, the safety net she'd been too afraid to rely on. She thought of her students, their excitement when she explained real-world economics, and how alive she felt guiding them. And for the first time in years, Natalie allowed herself to dream, not just of supporting someone else's goals, but of sharing in the building of something real, of becoming more than the foundation someone else stood on. As the soft glow of dawn stretched across their bedroom ceiling, Natalie made a decision. She would say yes. But not just as the silent partner she'd always been. She would bring her whole self to the table, her expertise, her experience, and yes, her father's legacy. It was time to step out of the shadows and into the light of her own potential. What Natalie didn't yet realize was that this choice would trigger a series of events, ones that would challenge their love, test their loyalty, and shake the foundation of everything they had built together. The calm before the storm was slipping away, and in its place, a brewing whirlwind of ambition, betrayal, and self-discovery loomed, one that would reshape their lives in ways neither Natalie nor Dylan could have foreseen. As she finally drifted into sleep, the first soft beams of Austin's sunrise filtered through their threadbare curtains. She couldn't shake the feeling that change was coming, whether for better or worse. A new chapter was waiting to be written, and this time Natalie was resolved not to be a footnote in someone else's story. The alarm blared, jolting her from restless sleep. As she reached to silence it, her hand brushed the drawer where her father's letter lay. A jolt of clarity surged through her. Today's the day, she thought. The day she would take the first real step toward her own future. Dylan stirred beside her, mumbling something about profit margins in his sleep. Natalie looked at him, a mix of affection and rising uncertainty swirling in her chest. How would he respond to her decision? Would he welcome her as a true partner, or feel threatened by her stepping forward? She shoved the worry aside. It was time to act, not overthink. As she went through her morning routine, prepping for another day of teaching, she felt a flicker of excitement she hadn't known in years. The idea of merging her economic insight with Dylan's entrepreneurial spirit filled her with a new sense of purpose. At breakfast, while Dylan studied notes from the seminar, Natalie cleared her throat. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she began, her voice more confident than she felt. Dylan looked up, a glimmer of anticipation in his eyes. "I'm in," Natalie said firmly. "But not as a helper, not quietly in the background. I want to be an equal partner. My knowledge, my skills, they're valuable, and I believe that together we can really make this work." For a moment, Dylan was quiet, and Natalie's pulse quickened. Then, slowly, a wide grin spread across his face. "Nat, that's amazing. I was hoping you'd say that. Your expertise, it's exactly what we need to make this real." Relief washed over her. She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "There's something else," she added gently. "I have some money saved, an inheritance from my dad. I think it's time we used it." Dylan's eyes widened. "Natalie, are you sure? I know how important that is to you." She nodded, feeling a burden lift from her shoulders. "I'm sure. My dad always wanted me to use it to chase something meaningful. And this, what we're creating, it could be that." As they sat together in the morning light that filtered through their small kitchen window, Natalie felt something settle inside her. For the first time in a long while, things felt right. This was the start of something new, something exciting, a real partnership where both of their strengths could shine. But as Natalie left for work that morning, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a caution. Change, even good change, often brought unexpected consequences. The road ahead would be anything but smooth, and the true test of their relationship, their individual resilience, and their understanding of success was still to come. She had no way of knowing it then, but the choice she'd made would soon ripple through her world, shaking everything she thought was solid. The school day flew by in a haze of lectures and grading, though Natalie's thoughts were far from her classroom. During quiet moments, she scribbled business ideas in the margins of her lesson plans, her economic know-how merging with Dylan's vision in surprisingly dynamic ways. When the final bell rang, Natalie gathered her things with a sense of eagerness she hadn't felt in years. She was ready to dive into this next chapter of their life. But just as she reached her car, her phone buzzed with a message from Dylan. "Big news. Meeting potential investors at Brixton's pub tonight. Join us." Natalie paused. Brixton's was one of downtown Austin's more upscale hangouts, worlds away from their usual low-key spots. The thought of mingling with investors both thrilled and intimidated her. Was she ready for this? Taking a breath, she texted back, "I'll be there. We're in this together. Remember?" Driving home to change, Natalie couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. Everything was happening so quickly. Just yesterday, she'd been questioning her own unrealized potential. And now here she was, about to step into the high-stakes world of investors and startups. When she arrived at Brixton's, she smoothed down the dress, her best one, even if it still felt slightly out of place among the bar's sleek modern vibe. She spotted Dylan at a corner table, deep in discussion with two sharply dressed men. As she approached, Dylan's face lit up. "And here she is," he said, rising to greet her. "Gentlemen, this is my wife and business partner, Natalie Parker. Nat, meet Jack Reeves and Mark Donovan from Horizon Ventures." Natalie extended her hand, meeting the men's cool professional expressions with a poised smile. She straightened her shoulders, steadying her voice. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," she said confidently. "I'm excited to explore how our sustainable agriculture concept can transform urban farming, especially in cities like Austin." Jack raised an eyebrow, seemingly impressed by her directness. "Dylan said you have a background in economics," he said. "How do you see that factoring into this venture?" Natalie launched into a concise, thoughtful explanation, highlighting market trends, scalability potential, and social impact models. Her voice gained strength as she spoke. Years of teaching economics had sharpened her communication skills, and now they were serving her well in this new setting. The conversation flowed easily, with Natalie and Dylan building on each other's points like a well-rehearsed team. As the evening unfolded, Natalie could sense the investors' growing interest. By the time they stood to leave, the handshakes were warmer, the smiles more genuine. "We'll be in touch," Mark said, handing Natalie his business card. "I think you two might be onto something here." As the investors made their exit, Dylan pulled Natalie into a tight embrace. "You were amazing," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "I knew you would be, but seeing you in action, Nat, we make one hell of a team." A rush of warmth spread through Natalie's chest, unexpected and overwhelming. For a split second, she wanted to freeze time, lock this feeling of recognition and partnership in a bottle. This was what she had been missing, the thrill of intellectual challenge, the satisfaction of being seen, really seen, for the skills she brought to the table. As they walked out of Brixton's arm in arm, Natalie noticed a group of young women at the bar, tossing admiring glances Dylan's way. Their laughter echoed, flirtatious and easy, and one of them even leaned in to whisper something to her friend, eyes still locked on Dylan. A small, unwelcome flicker of insecurity crept into her chest. In this shiny new world they were stepping into, filled with charm, charisma, and opportunity, would their connection be strong enough to withstand the pressure? She tightened her grip on Dylan's arm, silently willing herself to trust him, to trust them. She brushed the thought aside, focusing on the excitement of the night. They'd just taken their first real step toward building something meaningful together. Something that could change not only their lives, but their community as well. Driving home through the warm Austin night, Natalie's thoughts buzzed with plans and possibilities. She looked over at Dylan, his face bathed in the glow of passing streetlights, and felt a mix of love and a subtle apprehension. "You were incredible in there," Dylan said, breaking the comfortable silence. "The way you laid out the economic impact, I saw their faces change. They knew they were dealing with someone serious." Natalie smiled, the compliment landing deep. "We make a good team," she said softly. "Your vision, my numbers, it just works." "It more than works," Dylan said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "It's magic." But as they pulled into their apartment complex, Natalie's excitement was tinged with something else, melancholy. The porch light flickered as they approached, casting their familiar little home in a tired yellow haze. Their small home, once a symbol of hard-won stability, now felt like a shadow of a past life. Change was happening fast, and she couldn't help but wonder how it would shape their world. The following weeks flew by in a blur. Natalie threw herself into research, spending evenings and weekends drafting business plans, analyzing models, refining projections. She took a leave from teaching, a decision that both thrilled and haunted her. Her students had been her foundation, the reason she'd chosen that path to begin with. She kept their pictures on her desk, a silent reminder of what she was temporarily leaving behind. But this new opportunity called to her in a way she couldn't ignore. Dylan, too, was transformed. The slouched figure drained by failure was gone. He now moved with purpose, his days filled with networking calls, follow-ups with contacts from the seminar, and meetings with potential partners and suppliers. Their little apartment quickly turned into a chaotic headquarters for their budding business. The dining table vanished beneath stacks of laptops, notebooks, and printed spreadsheets. Sticky notes and whiteboards covered the walls, each scribble and line a piece of their dream unfolding. One evening, as they sat amidst the beautiful mess of their shared ambition, Dylan looked up from his laptop, grinning. "I think we need a name," he said. "Something that really says who we are," Dylan said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Natalie leaned back in her chair, stretching out her stiff muscles. "What did you have in mind?" "How about Greenrise Innovations?" Natalie repeated the name quietly, testing the feel of it. "Greenrise? It ties us to Austin, to where we started, but it also sounds fresh, forward-thinking, growth-focused." Dylan's eyes lit up. "Exactly. It's perfect." "Isn't it just like us?" he added, leaning in to kiss her. A rush of excitement fluttered in Natalie's chest. This was really happening. They were doing it, for real. A few weeks later, they hit their first major milestone. They secured their first round of funding. It wasn't the multi-million-dollar round of their dreams, but it was enough to lease a modest office space and hire their first employee, a brilliant young engineer named Alex, who shared their passion for sustainable agriculture. The day they moved into their new office, a converted warehouse just outside downtown Austin, felt surreal. Natalie stood in the center of the wide, open space, looking up at the exposed rafters, the industrial-style windows, the empty promise of it all. "Can you believe this?" Dylan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Our own company, our own space. We're really doing this, Nat." She leaned back into his embrace, letting the moment sink in. "We are," she said. "It's terrifying and exhilarating, all at once." They quickly settled into their new roles, Dylan as the charismatic CEO, Natalie as the rock-steady CFO. The days blurred together in a frenzy of meetings, emails, late-night takeout, and non-stop strategy sessions. Their prototype vertical farming unit began to take shape under Alex's skillful guidance. Each successful test brought them closer to making the concept a reality. But success also brought challenges. The more Greenrise grew, the more Natalie found herself buried in the tangled web of startup logistics, payroll, taxes, appeasing investors, budget projections. She enrolled in online courses, devouring content on small business operations and startup finance, desperate to stay ahead of the demands. One night, as she sat hunched over her laptop deciphering a particularly complex regulatory issue, Dylan walked up behind her and gently rubbed her shoulders. "You're working too hard," he murmured. "Come to bed." Natalie let herself lean into his touch, but shook her head. "I can't. There's too much to figure out. I feel like I'm always 10 steps behind." Dylan crouched down, turning her chair so he could look her in the eyes. "Hey, you're doing amazing. We wouldn't even be here without you. You know that, right?" Natalie smiled at his words, grateful for them. But a quiet part of her, one that had grown louder in recent weeks, couldn't help but wonder. Did he really see the full scope of her contribution? The weight she carried? The late nights? The unrelenting worry? The fact that she hadn't had a proper meal or seen a friend in weeks? As Greenrise continued to scale, so did the toll. Natalie was stretched thinner and thinner, her days a carousel of spreadsheets and financial reviews. She missed dinners, skipped social events, and let her world shrink to the confines of their office. Dylan, meanwhile, seemed to thrive. He was in his element, networking, pitching, charming people with his vision. His charisma drew attention everywhere he went. Natalie couldn't deny it. She felt a flicker of envy at how naturally he moved through this new world of theirs. One evening, as they prepared for a pivotal presentation to a room full of potential investors, Natalie felt the first real stirrings of discontent. She had spent weeks refining detailed financial projections and compiling risk assessments. But as she watched Dylan rehearse his pitch, she realized her work barely made it into his narrative. "Dylan," she said, interrupting his run-through gently, "don't you think we should include more about the financial stability of the company? Investors are going to want to hear about our long-term viability." Dylan waved it off. "Trust me, Nat. These guys want vision. They want to hear about changing the world. We'll get to the numbers later." Natalie swallowed her frustration. This was Dylan's strength, after all, his ability to sell a dream, to captivate a room. But the next day, as she watched him charm the investors with sweeping promises and impassioned language, she couldn't shake the feeling that something important was shifting between them. As the meeting wrapped with firm handshakes and enthusiastic promises of future talks, one of the investors pulled Natalie aside. "Impressive stuff," he said. "Your husband's quite the visionary. Natalie gave a tight smile. "We both are," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "Green Rise is our shared vision." The investor looked briefly surprised, then nodded. "Of course. Well, you've certainly got a bright future ahead of you." Riding the high of the meeting's success, Natalie tried to focus on the win. But inside, a small seed of resentment had begun to root. She was proud of Dylan, proud of what they had built. But she was also beginning to see that, in the emerging narrative of Green Rise Innovations, her role risked being reduced to a supporting character in Dylan's story. That night, as they toasted with a bottle of champagne in their still sparse apartment, Natalie made a quiet vow. She would not fade into the background. She would make sure her voice was heard, her value recognized. This wasn't just Dylan's dream. It was theirs, their company, their future. As she clinked glasses with Dylan, his eyes lit up with excitement and boundless ambition, Natalie felt a swirl of emotions: love, pride, resolve, and a flicker of unease. The path ahead was uncertain, full of promise and pitfalls. But one thing was clear: their journey was only just beginning, and she was ready to fight for her place in the spotlight. What she didn't know was that the challenges they'd faced so far were only the beginning. The real test of their partnership, their love, and their identities was still ahead. As Green Rise Innovations expanded, so too would the pressures, the attention, and the temptations. And whether they would grow stronger together or fall apart remained to be seen. The Austin night stretched wide before them, a canvas of possibilities and unknowns. As Natalie gazed out at the glittering city skyline, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was on the verge of change, for better or for worse. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at Brixton's pub, and Green Rise Innovations was no longer just a dream scribbled on napkins. "To us," Dylan said, his smile bright under the city lights, "and to changing the world, one vertical farm at a time." "To us," Natalie echoed with a smile, but a ripple of unease passed through her. The us Dylan referred to had begun to shift in subtle but significant ways over the past few weeks. What had once been a balanced partnership now felt lopsided. The turning point had come 3 weeks earlier. A chance encounter at a local tech conference led to a high-stakes meeting with AgriNova Solutions, a major player in agricultural technology. They were looking to diversify their portfolio, and Green Rise's innovative approach to urban farming had caught their attention. The negotiations were intense. Natalie had spent sleepless nights poring over contracts, her eyes burning as dawn broke through the window blinds, anxiety clinging to her like a second skin. She used every bit of her economic expertise to make sure they weren't being shortchanged. Meanwhile, Dylan captivated the AgriNova team with his infectious vision and boundless enthusiasm. In the end, they landed a deal worth $5 million. Enough to transform their prototype into a market-ready product and potentially scale their operations nationwide. The celebration dinner that followed was worlds apart from their usual Friday night pizza. They dined at Ember Plus Oak, one of Austin's most exclusive restaurants. Natalie couldn't help but feel slightly out of place amidst the polished silverware and crisp linen napkins. She kept adjusting her bracelet, her fingers itching with the need to feel grounded amid the surreal glamour. Dylan, by contrast, seemed to thrive in the opulence. "We should do this more often," he said, gesturing for another bottle of champagne. "We've earned it, Nat." She nodded, managing a smile. But deep down, she couldn't shake the sense that something had shifted beneath the surface. He was glowing in the spotlight, and she, somehow, had become part of the scenery. Still, she pushed it aside. This was their moment. She refused to let doubts cloud it. In the weeks that followed, Green Rise Innovations grew at a breathtaking pace. They moved out of their cramped apartment setup into a sleek downtown office. The team expanded rapidly. Engineers, marketers, admin staff filled the once empty spaces with noise and movement. Dylan flourished as the charismatic CEO. Investors loved him. The media did too. Local outlets were soon running glowing features on the Austin farm boy turned tech innovator. Natalie, meanwhile, found herself further in the background. Her days were filled with spreadsheets, risk models, and the less glamorous but entirely essential task of keeping the company's explosive growth sustainable. She had become the invisible scaffolding holding up the shiny tower Dylan was building. One evening, as she reviewed quarterly reports from their home office, Dylan came bounding in, practically buzzing. "Pack a bag," he grinned. "We're going to San Francisco." Natalie looked up, startled. "Wait, what? Why?" "Agronova wants us to present at their annual conference. It's huge, Nat. All the major players in sustainable ag will be there." Her heart sank. "Dylan, I can't just drop everything. We have a board meeting next week and I'm nowhere near done with the financial projections." His smile faltered. "Come on, Nat. This is important. Can't you just delegate some of that to the finance team?" "Delegate?" she repeated. "Dylan, I am the finance team. We can't afford to mess anything up right now." A flicker of irritation crossed Dylan's face. "Fine. I'll go alone. Someone has to represent the company after all." The words stung more than Natalie wanted to admit. As Dylan strode out of the room, she was left staring after him. Not just left behind for the trip, but slowly, quietly, left behind in the story of their shared dream. The San Francisco conference marked a shift. Dylan returned brimming with energy, throwing out ideas faster than she could track. He talked of rooftop gardens in New York, expansion possibilities in Chicago and Atlanta. Natalie listened, but a heavy unease began settling in her chest. "Slow down, Dylan," she urged. "We need to make sure our foundation is strong before we start chasing more cities." "You worry too much, Nat," he replied, brushing her off. "We need to strike while the iron's hot." It was a phrase she'd hear over and over again in the months that followed. As GreenRise innovations surged forward, so did the demands. Long hours bled into the night. Natalie's social life faded. Friends' calls went unanswered. Dinners were skipped. Her world condensed into spreadsheets and boardroom agendas. Dylan, meanwhile, seemed to thrive. He was always flying to a new city, attending another panel, giving another keynote. When he was home, his body was present, but his mind was elsewhere. One night, lying in bed, the physical closeness between them belied the emotional distance Natalie could no longer ignore. "Dylan," she began carefully, "are you happy with us?" He turned toward her, surprise flickering across his face. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? We're living the dream, Nat." "But whose dream?" The question hung in the air, unspoken, unanswered. As summer faded into fall, Natalie found an unexpected confidant in Sarah Chen, GreenRise's new head of operations. Smart, ambitious, and refreshingly real, Sarah quickly became not just a colleague, but a friend. Over lunch one afternoon, Natalie asked, "How do you manage it? The job, the expectations, and still have a personal life?" Sarah gave a dry laugh, bitterness creeping in. "Who says I do? My last relationship ended because I was married to this job. But hey, at least my job appreciates me." The words hit harder than Natalie expected. She thought of the untouched stack of old lesson plans on her desk back at East Austin High, of the polite, concerned emails from her former principal. She had taken a sabbatical to focus on GreenRise, but returning to teaching felt more like a ghost of a life she barely recognized. "Sometimes I wonder if Dylan even notices what I contribute anymore," she admitted, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. Sarah's gaze softened. "Hey, this company wouldn't exist without you. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." The words stayed with Natalie long after, a faint spark of validation in a growing cloud of self-doubt. As GreenRise approached its one-year anniversary, the cracks in Natalie and Dylan's relationship grew harder to ignore. Their conversations, once full of shared vision and private laughter, had devolved into strategy updates and budget debates. Dylan's business trips dragged on longer. What were supposed to be a few days stretched into weeks. Even when he was home, his attention was elsewhere. Emails, meetings, conference calls, even in bed. Natalie threw herself into her work, letting the endless tasks distract her from the quiet ache that now lived in the corners of their apartment. Natalie refined their financial models, streamlined operations, and quietly fortified the company's foundation, while Dylan chased the next big opportunity. It was during one of Dylan's extended trips that Natalie made a startling discovery. While reviewing old files, she stumbled across a folder of notes from their earliest brainstorming sessions, pages and pages in her own handwriting. Marketing strategies, distribution channels, even the fundamental idea of modular vertical farming units. All hers. Yet, in every press release, every interview, every article, those innovations were credited solely to Dylan. The realization landed like a punch to the gut. Had she really faded so far into the background that even her own husband had forgotten what she brought to the table? When Dylan returned, tanned and recharged from a conference in Los Angeles, Natalie had every intention of addressing it. But before she could get a word out, he dropped his own bombshell. "I think we should move the company to Silicon Valley," he said casually over dinner. "We're outgrowing Austin, Nat. If we want to compete at the top, we need to be where the action is." Natalie stared at him, speechless. Leave Austin? Leave her community, her friends, the city they had built their dream to serve? "Dylan, our mission was about bringing innovation to underserved urban areas. This urban area. Austin. How can we just walk away from that?" His jaw tightened. "We're not walking away. We're scaling up. Think bigger, Nat. We could be global." "And what about me?" Natalie asked quietly. "My role in all this? Don't you remember this company was built on both our ideas, our effort?" For a brief second, confusion flickered across Dylan's face. "What are you talking about? Of course I appreciate your help." "My help?" Natalie's voice sharpened, the anger finally breaking through the calm. "Dylan, I'm not your assistant. I'm your partner. Or at least, I thought I was." What followed was a fight like none they'd ever had. Years of simmering resentments and diverging visions finally erupting into the open. Words were said, accusations hurled. When it was over, they retreated to separate rooms, the silence heavier than any screaming match. That night, Natalie lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The company was thriving, but what was it costing them? She thought about her father's letter, about the inheritance she had poured into this dream. Had she been foolish to believe she could carve out an equal seat at the table? Or had she slowly, unknowingly, allowed herself to be pushed back into the background? The next morning, they moved around each other in tense silence. As Dylan grabbed his keys to head out, Natalie took a breath. "We need to talk," she said, her voice even despite the ache in her chest. "Really talk. About the company. About us. About what happens next." Dylan paused at the door, unreadable. "Fine. Tonight, we'll figure it out." But as the door clicked shut behind him, Natalie stood still, the weight of something unspoken heavy in the air. A shift had already occurred, and no matter what was said that night, she could feel it. The vision of true partnership, of shared success and mutual recognition, felt increasingly out of reach. And what she didn't know yet was that the conversation waiting for them that evening would mark the beginning of a reckoning, one that would test their marriage, their values, and the very soul of what they had built. As the door clicked shut behind Dylan, Natalie sank into a chair. The weight of everything left pressing down on her like a storm cloud. The company they had built from the ground up was flourishing, but the toll it had taken on their relationship was undeniable. She glanced toward the mantel, where a framed photo from the early days of Greenrise sat, a candid shot of the two of them, faces lit up with hope and purpose. When had that unity started to crack? And more importantly, could they find their way back? The hours crawled by, each one dragging new waves of anxiety with it. Natalie tried to bury herself in work, but her mind kept circling back to the looming conversation ahead. By the time she heard Dylan's key turn in the lock that evening, her nerves were frayed to threads. He walked in, his face set in practiced neutrality. "Hey," he said softly. "You ready to talk?" Natalie nodded and gestured toward the dining table, where 2 glasses of wine sat waiting, a blend of peace offering and courage in liquid form. They sat across from each other, the space between them feeling somehow too far and too close all at once. Natalie took a steadying breath. "Dylan, I can't shake the feeling that we've lost sight of why we started this company. It was supposed to be about impact, about building something together. But lately, I feel like I'm vanishing into the background." Dylan's brow furrowed. "Nat, you know how much I value your input, but someone has to be the public face to make the connections, pitch the vision." "I understand that," she cut in gently but firmly, "but it's more than just public image. My ideas, my work, they're being erased. Every press release, every article, it's like I don't exist." A flicker of guilt crossed Dylan's face before defensiveness took its place. "That's not fair. I always mention you as co-founder." "Co-founder," Natalie repeated, the word sharp on her tongue. "Not partner, not equal." Do you even remember who came up with the modular unit model or the community reinvestment strategy? His silence was louder than any answer. Natalie pushed forward, months of pent-up frustration rising to the surface. I've poured everything into this company, my time, my expertise, my inheritance, but the more we succeed, the more I feel like we're drifting apart. Dylan ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture of agitation. Natalie, you can't deny the company is thriving. We're right on the edge of something huge. Isn't that what matters? Of course it matters, she replied quickly. Not at the expense of us, Dylan, Natalie said, her voice soft but unwavering. When was the last time we talked about something other than work? When was the last time we were just together? The silence that followed was thick, weighted with everything they hadn't said. Dylan's gaze dropped to his wine glass. I don't know, he admitted quietly. I guess I've been so focused on making it all work, on proving we could really do this. But at what cost? Natalie asked gently. I'm proud of what we've built, Dylan. But I'm not willing to sacrifice us for it. We need to find balance. Dylan nodded slowly, and for a moment she saw a flicker of the man she had fallen in love with, the dreamer, not just the CEO. You're right, he said. I've been caught up in it all. The momentum, the recognition. I didn't realize how much it was hurting us. A spark of hope ignited in Natalie's chest. Then what do we do? She asked softly. How do we fix this? Dylan reached across the table and took her hand. We reset, he said. Start over. I'll make sure your contributions are seen. We'll make decisions together, like we used to. Natalie squeezed his hand, hoping to believe him. And the move to Silicon Valley? She asked. He hesitated, and her heart sank. It's a big opportunity, Nat. But maybe we compromise, keep the main office here in Austin, expand slowly, do it right. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A start. As they talked late into the night, about shared responsibilities, planned date nights, and renewed purpose, Natalie felt some of the tension between them begin to lift. But even as they finally crawled into bed, a voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Promises are easy in moments like this. The real test comes later. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, painting soft gold across their bedroom walls. Natalie reached out instinctively, only to find Dylan's side of the bed empty. A note rested on his pillow. Early meeting. Didn't want to wake you. Let's have dinner tonight, just us. Love you. She traced the words with her fingers, heart flickering between hope and doubt. Could they really find their way back? Or was this just another calm before a bigger storm? As she dressed for the day, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a pivotal crossroads, not just for Greenrise Innovations, but for their marriage. And what she didn't know was that forces were already moving that would test everything. The true crucible was still ahead. The Texas summer heat shimmered off the pavement as Natalie pulled into the driveway of their modern suburban home. 2 years had passed since that fateful night at Brixton's pub, and Greenrise had grown beyond anything they could have imagined. But the silence that greeted her now was deafening. The house, meant to symbolize their shared success, felt more like a gilded cage. She noticed Dylan's Tesla parked in the garage, odd for a Tuesday afternoon. Her heart quickened, hope and anxiety pulsing together. Maybe he'd come home early. Maybe this was the moment they finally reconnected after so many missed dinners and emotionally distant weeks. She stepped inside, and the hush of the house wrapped around her like a fog. Dylan, she called out, her voice echoing in the wide foyer. His voice came from the study. In here. Moving through the house, Natalie felt as though the walls were closing in around her like a slow, silent avalanche. Her footsteps echoed off the polished hardwood, each step sounding louder than the last. Something about the silence, the way the air seemed unnaturally still, made her skin crawl. She found Dylan seated at his desk in the study, posture stiff, hands clasped tightly in front of him. The sight sent a cold wave down her spine. We need to talk, he said. 4 words. 4 plain words that fractured everything she thought she knew. Okay, Natalie replied, lowering herself into the chair opposite him. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. What's going on, Dylan? He took a breath, eyes fixed somewhere over her shoulder, anywhere but at her. I want a divorce. The words hit like a slap. The air left her lungs. Natalie stared, unable to move, unable to fully process what she had just heard. What? she managed barely above a whisper. Finally, Dylan looked at her, and what she saw there made her stomach twist. Not just guilt or regret, but the unmistakable glint of escape. Guilt, determination, and something that looked disturbingly like relief. "I'm sorry, Nat. I've tried. I really have. But I'm not happy. We're not happy. And I think deep down you know that too." Her mind spun, flashing through the months of late nights, missed milestones, awkward silences. The signs were all there. But divorce? How did we get here? She murmured. And then the question she'd kept buried in the darkest corner of her mind surged up before she could stop it. "Is there someone else?" His hesitation was her answer. "Yes," Dylan said at last. "Her name's Melissa. She's a model. I met her at a charity gala in San Francisco." It should have knocked her off her axis. But Natalie felt strangely detached, like she was observing it all from somewhere outside her body. "How long?" she asked, amazed by how even her tone sounded. 3 months, Dylan admitted, and a flicker of surprise crossed his face at her composure. "Natalie, I never meant for this to happen. It just did." A hollow laugh escaped her lips, sharp and bitter. "It just happened?" "Dylan, affairs don't just happen. You made a choice, repeatedly, for 3 months." He looked away, shame coloring his face, but he didn't back down. "I know this is hard to hear, but I think it's for the best. We've been drifting apart for a long time. Green Rise, it's changed us. It's changed me." And just like that, the memories surged, vivid and uninvited. Late nights in their tiny first office, Natalie hunched over spreadsheets, solving problems that kept the company afloat, her voice firm but hopeful as she pointed to a chart. "If we reallocate this portion of the debt, we can stretch our runway another 6 months. Dylan had kissed her that day, full of gratitude, full of love. "What would I do without you, Nat? You're the brains of this whole thing." It had been the day they landed their first major contract, secured largely thanks to Natalie's carefully constructed presentation on sustainable scalability. It had turned skeptical executives into believers. "Miss Parker," the CEO had said, thoroughly impressed, "your understanding of both the economic and environmental dimensions is extraordinary. You've got yourselves a deal." Dylan had beamed, pride glowing in his eyes as he squeezed her hand beneath the table. There had been countless strategy sessions after that, nights where Natalie's insights had quietly shaped the very foundation of Green Rise innovations. "What if we focused on modular systems?" she'd suggested one evening, hunched over a sketch pad. "It would make our setups adaptable. Rooftops, vacant lots, repurposed industrial zones." Dylan's eyes had lit up. "That's brilliant, Nat. This could be our market edge." But the memory that hurt the most, cutting deeper than any of the others, was from just 6 months ago. They'd been on the brink of a bold expansion, but the numbers weren't working. They needed a significant infusion of cash, and their investors were hesitating. Natalie had paced their bedroom, torn between fear and belief. Then she turned to Dylan and said, "I think it's time I told you something." She retrieved an old shoebox from the closet and opened it to reveal a letter from her father and a series of bank statements. Dylan's eyes widened. "My dad left me an inheritance," she said. "I never touched it. I was saving it for something that mattered." She had met his gaze, steady and certain. "This company, our dream, I believe this is it." Dylan had been speechless, stunned by the gesture. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is your safety net." "I'm sure," she'd replied. "I believe in us. Let me be your silent partner, in every way." The capital had propelled Green Rise to new heights, and now, mere months later... Natalie blinked, yanked out of memory by the sound of Dylan's voice. "I've already drawn up the paperwork," he said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. "I think you'll find the terms fair." Her eyes dropped to the folder. Her heart raced. "You've already?" "I thought it would be easier this way," Dylan added, his tone clipped. "Clean break. No need to drag it out. You can keep the house. I've included a generous settlement." The calm she'd forced herself to hold cracked, anger beginning to simmer beneath. "Generous?" she repeated, the word like poison on her tongue. "Dylan, do you even hear yourself? This company, everything we built, it's as much mine as it is yours." Dylan's jaw clenched. "Natalie, be reasonable. Yes, you were supportive, and that initial investment was huge, but I'm the face of Green Rise. The media, the investors, they associate the company with me." Every word stabbed through the fragile illusion Natalie had held on to, the illusion of true partnership, of shared purpose, of a love strong enough to withstand anything. "I see," she whispered. She reached for the folder. Her movements felt robotic. "And when did you want me to sign these?" Dylan looked startled by her calm. You can take time. Of course. Have a lawyer look over them if you want." Natalie shook her head, a strange clarity washing over her. "No need. You want a clean break? Let's make it clean." She opened the folder, her eyes grazing the text without registering it. Her hand hovered over the signature line, pen poised. In that moment, everything else seemed to fade. Still, Natalie saw it all with perfect clarity, the crossroads before her. She could sign the papers, walk away with her dignity intact and a generous settlement. She could vanish from the narrative, become a footnote in Dylan Hughes's rise to fame. Or, the pen clattered onto the desk, snapping Dylan's attention. "Actually," Natalie said, her voice steady, cold and sharp like steel, "I think I will have a lawyer look these over." Dylan's brow knit, confusion flickering into worry. "What are you talking about, Nat?" Natalie stood slowly, smoothing the front of her skirt with deliberate calm. "Oh, just that I think the company's legal team would be very interested to know that their CFO and silent partner is being pushed out without proper compensation." The color drained from Dylan's face. "Silent partner," he echoed. "You seem to have forgotten, Dylan." Natalie continued, her tone clipped but composed, "that my inheritance didn't just save Green Rise, it made me an equal owner." Her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. 50%, to be exact. All very legal, all very binding. I wonder what the board would think about that. Dylan shot to his feet, his chair screeching backward on the hardwood. "You wouldn't, Natalie. Think about what you're saying. This could ruin everything we've built." "No," she said, cutting him off. Her voice was razor sharp now. "This could ruin everything you've built. On my work, my ideas, my money. I've stood in your shadow long enough, Dylan." She turned, walking toward the door, then paused. "It's time I stepped into the light." She looked back over her shoulder one last time. "Oh, and I'd strongly advise against making any sudden decisions. Any attempt to move assets or restructure the company without my approval could be problematic." With that, she walked out of the study and out of the house that had never truly felt like hers. The pain still pulsed, deep, raw, but it was overpowered by something else. Power. The power of reclaiming her voice, of standing in her truth, of taking back control of her own story. Natalie stepped into her car, her hands trembling slightly as they gripped the steering wheel. The Austin sun beat down, but inside her chest, something hotter burned. The new fire, one she hadn't felt in a long time. She pulled out her phone, scrolling until she found a number she hadn't dialed in far too long. "Sarah? It's Natalie. Listen, I need your help. It's time we made some changes at Green Rise." And as she backed out of the driveway, leaving behind the wreckage of her marriage, Natalie felt the first sparks of something new. Something powerful. Something entirely her own. Natalie allowed herself a small, fierce smile. The rules had shifted. The mask was off. The game had changed, and Dylan had no idea what was coming. The next morning dawned bright and merciless. The Austin heat was already thick in the air as Natalie walked briskly into the Green Rise offices. She hadn't slept. Most of the night had been spent in urgent discussions with Sarah and a hand-picked team of trusted advisors. The kind of war room energy that only precedes seismic change. As she strode through the sleek, open-concept workspace, she could feel the ripple of whispers, the curious glances that trailed behind her. Word moved fast in a company this size, and her unexpected early arrival had definitely stirred the pot. She paused outside the executive suite. Through the glass walls of Dylan's office, she saw him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly. Their eyes locked for a charged moment, his filled with nerves masked by arrogance, hers with steely resolve, before Natalie turned away and entered her own office, closing the door firmly behind her. Within minutes, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Texts, calls from board members, investors, even a few journalists eager for a quote on rumors of internal conflict at Green Rise. Natalie ignored them all. She had a mission. She pulled up the company's financials, records she knew better than anyone else. With cold, methodical focus, she began compiling a comprehensive dossier outlining her contributions, financial, strategic, and intellectual. Each line of data was a battle scar. every figure a proof of the invisible labor that had kept Greenrise alive. The memories returned with every line she documented. The night she stayed up till dawn, restructuring their entire supply chain to reduce costs without compromising quality. Dylan had presented the plan as his own at the next board meeting. He'd received praise, while Natalie sat silently by his side. The community outreach initiative she had designed. It had reshaped Greenrise's public image and opened access to underserved markets across the country. Dylan had smiled for the cameras while Natalie coordinated everything behind the scenes. The countless hours spent nurturing investor relationships, winning over skeptical VCs with her economic insight and genuine passion for sustainable agriculture. Yet it was always Dylan who shook the hands, who got the headlines. A knock at the door jolted her back to the present. Sarah stood there, her face a mix of urgency and resolve. "The board's calling an emergency meeting," she said. "1 hour. Dylan's trying to frame this as a personal issue. Claims it won't affect the company." Natalie nodded, her lips curving into a grim smile. "Then let him find out the cost of underestimating me." As Sarah turned to go, Natalie called after her. "Sarah, thank you for everything." Sarah paused, her expression softening. "We've got your back, Nat." It's about time everyone saw the truth. The hour that followed blurred into a storm of preparation. But as Natalie walked to the boardroom, a strange calm settled over her. This was her moment. Her chance to reclaim the story. She stepped into the boardroom. It was already full. Board members, major investors, and of course Dylan. He sat at the head of the long table, his signature smile stretched thin, the usual confidence underneath it visibly strained. "Ah, Natalie," he said, voice falsely casual. "I was just reassuring the board that, while our personal situation is unfortunate, it won't have any impact on company operations." Natalie took her seat, meeting the wary, curious gazes of those assembled. Her tone was cool, her voice steady. "I'm afraid I'll have to disagree with that, Dylan. Our personal situation, as you call it, is deeply entangled with the future of Greenrise Innovations." She opened the folder in front of her and calmly distributed neatly bound packets down the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "what you're looking at is a comprehensive breakdown of my contributions to this company. Financial, strategic, and intellectual." A hush fell over the room as papers rustled and eyes scanned the documents. The mood shifted, confusion giving way to dawning realization. "As you'll see," Natalie continued, her voice clear, "my involvement goes far beyond being the CFO or a supportive spouse. The predictive algorithms that guide our crop yield models, those are mine. The modular unit concept that sets Greenrise apart from competitors, also mine. The outreach program that opened up new markets across 3 states, my initiative." She paused, allowing the words to settle in the room like dust. Across the table, Dylan had gone pale, his knuckles tight around the arms of his chair. "But perhaps most important," Natalie said, her voice calm and cutting, "you'll find, on page 12, details of a personal investment made 2 years ago, one that prevented Greenrise from going under and allowed us to expand nationally." One of the board members, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet, looked up from her copy. "This investment," she said slowly, "came from you personally, Miss Parker." Natalie nodded. "Yes, it was an inheritance from my father. I chose to invest it in what I believed was a shared vision." She let that hang in the air before continuing. "And that investment," she added, "as outlined in the legally binding documents in front of you, gave me 50% ownership of Greenrise Innovations." The room erupted in murmurs and whispered commentary. Dylan stood abruptly, his composure shattering. "This is insane, Natalie. You can't just—" "I can," she said, cutting him off coldly, "and I have." She turned to address the board fully now, her voice firm with conviction. "For years, I've allowed Dylan to take the credit, to be the public face while I stayed in the background. That ends today. I'm not here to tear down what we've built. Greenrise's mission, urban agricultural innovation, sustainability, that's still at the core of what I believe in, but I will no longer let my role be diminished." Janet leaned forward, arms crossed, her tone measured. "What are you proposing, Miss Parker?" Natalie took a slow, steady breath. "I'm exercising my right as equal partner to influence the direction of the company. I propose a restructuring of the executive leadership. I will take on the role of co-CEO with a specific focus on strategy and innovation. The silence that followed was absolute. Dylan looked like he'd just taken a punch. His earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by disbelief. One of the investors, Robert, a longtime supporter of Dylan, cleared his throat. "This is a lot to take in," he said slowly. "Perhaps we should review these documents more thoroughly before making any formal decisions." Natalie nodded, her posture calm but her gaze sharp. "Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions," she said. "But just to be clear, I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you of how things will proceed from here." As the meeting adjourned, the tension in the room crackled like static. Board members gathered in hushed clusters, exchanging glances and whispers. Natalie stood tall, calmly gathering her materials. She could feel Dylan's glare from across the room, anger, confusion, and disbelief radiating off him like heat. As she made her way toward the exit, Janet Holbrook, the keen-eyed board member, fell into step beside her. "Well," Janet said, voice a blend of intrigue and fatigue, "that was quite the bombshell you dropped, Miss Parker." Natalie met her gaze without flinching. "Sometimes a bombshell is exactly what's needed to clear the air, Miss Holbrook. I trust you'll give my proposal the serious consideration it deserves." Janet nodded slowly, a flicker of something like respect crossing her face. "Oh, we certainly will. I have a feeling things around here are about to get very interesting." As Natalie stepped out of the boardroom, she spotted Sarah waiting in the corridor. Concern was etched into her features. "How did it go?" Sarah asked in a low voice. "About as well as could be expected," Natalie replied, her voice even though adrenaline still coursed through her veins. "The board's rattled, but they're listening. That's something." They made their way back to Natalie's office, closing the door behind them, shutting out the curious stares and hushed murmurs. Inside, Natalie finally allowed herself a moment to exhale. She sank into her chair with a heavy sigh. "God, Sarah, what have I done?" Sarah sat on the edge of the desk, her tone softening. "You stood up for yourself, for your vision, for your work. It's about damn time." Natalie rubbed a hand over her face, then through her hair. I know. It's just so long I convinced myself that supporting Dylan, staying behind the scenes, being the power behind the throne was enough. That I didn't need the credit as long as the mission was succeeding." "And now?" Sarah asked gently. Natalie's eyes hardened. Determination reignited. "Now I realize that by letting myself be sidelined, I wasn't just doing a disservice to myself, but to every woman who's ever been told to shrink herself for the sake of a man's ego." She stood and began pacing the length of her office. "This company, this mission, it's mine, just as much as his, maybe more. And I'll be damned if I let him shove me aside just because he wants to upgrade to a younger model." Sarah grinned, pride blazing in her expression. "That's the Natalie I know. So, what's our next move?" Natalie paused, her eyes falling on a framed photo on her desk, her and Dylan standing proudly beside their first vertical farm prototype. They looked so young, so full of purpose. For a moment, her resolve wavered. For just a moment, was she really ready to risk dismantling everything they had built together? But then she remembered the cold detachment in Dylan's eyes as he handed her those divorce papers. The clinical way he tried to erase years of her labor, her devotion, her vision. Natalie's jaw tightened. Determination surged through her. "Our next move," she said, turning to Sarah, "is to make sure everyone in this company knows exactly what I've contributed. No more shadows. No more letting Dylan take credit for my work." She moved to her desk, fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm calling an all-hands meeting. It's time they heard the truth, straight from me." As Sarah nodded and left to handle logistics, Natalie was left alone with her thoughts. The path ahead was uncertain, laced with potential setbacks and conflict, but for the first time in years she felt awake, alive, with her hands firmly on the wheel of her own story. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dylan. "We need to talk." Privately, Natalie stared at the screen, emotions swirling. Part of her, the part that still remembered the young, idealistic couple they once were, wanted to believe reconciliation was possible, that they could find common ground. But the wiser part of her, the woman she had become, knew those days were over. Dylan had made his choice. Now it was her turn. She typed her reply. "Anything you need to say can be said to the board. This isn't personal, Dylan, it's business." As she hit send, a weight lifted from her chest. The decision was made. There was no turning back, only forward, into a future she would shape with her own hands. The all-hands meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Natalie spent the night refining her message, preparing herself for what was to come. She knew not everyone in the company would welcome her bold move. Dylan's charm had earned him plenty of loyalists, but Natalie was done playing backup. It was time to conduct her own symphony. At dawn, as light broke over Austin, Natalie stood in front of her mirror, applying her makeup with meticulous care. She chose her outfit deliberately, a sharply tailored navy suit that radiated authority and confidence. Gone were the soft tones, the subtle lines of the supportive partner. Today, she dressed for battle. The Green Rise offices buzzed with anticipation when she arrived. Employees clustered in hushed groups, eyes tracking her every step. Speculation was thick in the air. She walked with purpose to the large conference room. Sarah met her at the door, tablet in hand. "Standing room only," she reported. "Looks like everyone's eager to hear what you have to say." Natalie nodded, drawing a deep breath. "Let's not keep them waiting." As she stepped into the room, the chatter ceased. A hush swept through the space like a ripple. Dylan was nowhere to be seen. A small mercy, Natalie thought. This moment, it was hers. Natalie stepped to the front of the room, taking her place before a sea of expectant faces. Curiosity, confusion, a flicker of apprehension. She let the silence linger, building anticipation before speaking. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice calm, unwavering. "I'm sure many of you are wondering why I've called this meeting. There have been rumors, whispers of changes at the highest levels of Green Rise Innovations. Today, I'm here to address those rumors head-on and to share some truths that are long overdue." She scanned the room, locking eyes with one employee after another. "For years, I've worked quietly behind the scenes. I let others, namely my husband Dylan, take credit for innovations and strategies that helped shape this company. That ends now." A murmur rippled through the room, but Natalie pressed forward, her confidence strengthening with every word. "Most of you know me as the CFO, as Dylan's supportive wife, but my role here goes far beyond financial oversight. The vertical farming algorithms that differentiate our systems, my design. The modular structures that have become our industry hallmark, my concept. The community programs that expanded us into underserved urban markets, my initiative." She clicked the remote in her hand, and the screen behind her lit up with a slideshow, each slide documenting a key Green Rise milestone, clearly attributed to her. "I'm not here to take away from the work each of you has done," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Every person in this room has contributed to Green Rise's success. But for too long, the truth about our leadership, about my leadership, has been hidden. It's time for transparency." She inhaled deeply, bracing for the revelation that would change everything. "What many of you don't know," she continued, "is that 2 years ago, when Green Rise was on the verge of collapse, it was my personal inheritance that kept the company afloat." Gasps and whispers filled the air. "That investment gave me 50% ownership. I am, legally and operationally, an equal partner in Green Rise Innovations." The room erupted in murmurs. Natalie waited patiently for the noise to settle before going on. "I share this now because recent events have made it clear that I can no longer remain in the background. Dylan and I are separating, both personally and professionally. But let me be clear, my commitment to this company, to our mission of transforming urban agriculture, has never been stronger." She straightened her spine, letting her gaze sweep across the crowd. "Going forward, I will be stepping into a more visible leadership role. The board is currently reviewing a proposal for me to assume the position of co-CEO, focusing on strategy and innovation." A heavy silence fell across the room. Shock, uncertainty, recalibration. Natalie could see it in their eyes. Everything they thought they knew about the company was shifting. "I understand this is a lot to absorb," she said gently. "Change can be difficult, but my goal is not disruption, it's enhancement. To bring new ideas to the table, to ensure we continue to lead the way in sustainable urban farming." She gave a final, steady nod. "I'm happy to answer any questions, now or in the days to come. My door is always open. Thank you for your time, and for your continued commitment to our shared vision." As Natalie stepped down from the podium, the room erupted. not just in applause but in energy that crackled with tension and curiosity. Some employees surged forward with congratulations and questions. Others lingered near the walls, their expressions skeptical or openly unsettled. Sarah was at her side in an instant, a wide, proud smile lighting up her face. "You did it, Nat. No going back now." Natalie nodded, a surge of adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "No going back," she echoed. "Only forward." She moved through the crowd, shaking hands, answering questions, accepting words of support. Each interaction felt like both a victory and a test, a new chapter beginning, but one that demanded vigilance. Then her eyes landed on a familiar figure lingering at the back of the room. Dylan. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral, but the fire behind his eyes betrayed him. They locked eyes across the sea of people. A silent challenge passed between them. For a moment, it felt like the room disappeared. The past, the pain, the betrayal, they all stood between them, unspoken and heavy. And Natalie understood in that moment, the real battle was only just beginning. But this time she was ready. The die had been cast. The queen had made her move. And Natalie Parker was ready to rewrite the rules of the game. The Austin skyline shimmered in the distance as Dylan Hughes raised his glass, a victorious smile curling at his lips. He stood on the rooftop bar of the historic Violet Crown Tower, once the tallest building between Houston and El Paso, soaking in the panoramic view of the city he was leaving behind. "To new beginnings," he toasted, clinking glasses with Melissa, the statuesque model who had quickly become a regular presence at his side. Melissa giggled, her voice airy and sweet, and to the man who's about to take Silicon Valley by storm. Dylan grinned, letting her praise wash over him, basking in the rush of possibility. Since signing the divorce papers, he'd felt lighter, unencumbered. Natalie's quiet grace had surprised him. No courtroom battles, no accusations, no public fallout. Just a clean break. Just freedom. He turned back to the view, heart thrumming with anticipation. Greenrise Innovations was on the verge of a massive expansion into the Bay Area market, poised to elevate them into the elite ranks of the tech industry. And at the center of it all, Dylan Hughes. "I've been thinking about a rebrand," he mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Greenrise, it feels too local, too small. We need something sleeker, more Silicon Valley." Melissa's eyes lit up. "Ooh, how about Ecotech Innovations, or VertGrow Solutions?" Dylan laughed, pulling her into his side. "This is why I keep you around. Fresh eyes, no baggage." His tone was playful, but beneath it was a sharp edge, an eagerness to shed everything that tethered him to his past. The champagne flowed, the laughter grew. Later, Dylan found himself surrounded by a circle of eager young entrepreneurs, some of whom had recognized him from recent media coverage. He leaned into the attention, effortlessly holding court, recounting tales of Greenrise's ascent. In his version of the story, Natalie didn't exist. He was the visionary, the architect of success, the sole force behind the company's growth. "The key," he confided, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone, "is to never let sentiment cloud your judgment." "Business is business," Dylan said, swirling the last of the champagne in his glass. "You have to be willing to cut ties, move on, always be chasing the next big thing." He said it like scripture, as if betrayal was a badge of brilliance. The group around him nodded, captivated, hanging on every word. Dylan felt invincible, unstoppable, ready to take the world by storm. He didn't notice the flicker of doubt behind one young founder's eyes, or the way Melissa glanced at her phone under the table. Little did he know, across town, the very foundations of his empire had already begun to shift. Natalie sat in her home office, surrounded by folders, binders, and legal briefs. The gentle glow of her computer screen cast sharp lines across her face, illuminating the determination in her eyes. She was deep in financial records and buried in company bylaws when a knock on the door broke her focus. "Come in," she called without looking up. Sarah stepped inside, balancing 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you could use a refill," she said, setting one beside her. Natalie leaned back and rubbed her eyes. "Thanks, I needed that. How's it going?" Sarah asked, perching on the edge of the desk. Natalie exhaled. "Complicated. Dylan's been busy while I was busy playing the supportive wife." She gestured toward her screen. "There are shell companies, offshore accounts. It's like trying to untangle a spider's web." Sarah's brow furrowed. "Anything illegal?" Not directly, Natalie replied, sighing. Just ethically gray. He's been funneling company resources into the Silicon Valley expansion without full board approval, and some of the investments look like they're benefiting him, not Green Rise. Bastard, Sarah muttered. He's building an empire on shadows, Natalie said. And I'm the one holding the flashlight now. So, she asked after a beat, what's our next move? Natalie took a sip of coffee, her mind already in motion. We have to be strategic. If we move too fast, we risk shaking investor confidence and crashing the company's value. But if we don't act, Sarah finished, he walks away with everything. Natalie nodded. Exactly. She turned back to her screen and pulled up a dense spreadsheet. I've been working on a plan. We'll need allies inside Green Rise and in the wider business world, and we need to reinforce our legal footing. Sarah leaned over the desk, her eyes scanning the numbers and notations. This is Dan. You've thought through everything. Natalie allowed herself a small, razor-sharp smile. I've spent years being underestimated. Now it's time for everyone to remember who built this company from the ground up. As they leaned into the plan together, Natalie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Fire. This wasn't just about her stake in the company. It was about reclaiming her place, her voice, her vision, in the empire she had helped build. It was about proving that she was never just the brain behind the scenes, she was the storm on the horizon. The weeks that followed unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Natalie and Dylan, each maneuvering behind the scenes, trying to outflank the other. Dylan, riding high on what he believed was a clean break, dove headfirst into expansion. He brought on high-profile consultants, leased glass-walled offices in Palo Alto, and began courting a new class of elite investors. His name and face appeared on tech magazine covers and local business segments, always with the beautiful, ever-smiling Melissa on his arm. But beneath the surface, fractures had begun to spread. Board members who were once enamored by Dylan's charm now began to raise questions. Sharp, uncomfortable ones, about the financial wisdom of such aggressive expansion. Veteran employees, still fiercely loyal to Green Rise's Austin roots, grumbled about the sudden pivot toward the Bay Area. Meanwhile, Natalie was working around the clock to solidify her position. She began quietly reaching out to key investors, presenting her own vision for Green Rise's future, one rooted in responsible growth and sustainable innovation. Her grasp of the company's financials and day-to-day operations left many surprised. Some who had previously dismissed her as Dylan's wife now saw her as a force in her own right. Inside the company, she focused on building bridges at every level. She opened her office doors, literally, inviting team members to share ideas and concerns. Slowly, steadily, she began to win allies, win trust. The emotional toll of the divorce and power struggle wore heavily on both Natalie and Dylan, though they handled it in drastically different ways. Dylan threw himself into the fast-paced Silicon Valley lifestyle, lavish parties, high-profile events, public praise. He soaked it all in, the admiration of people dazzled by the myth of his meteoric rise. But in the quiet moments, doubt crept in. He missed the grounding force Natalie had been, her steadiness. Her presence during those chaotic early days when Green Rise was nothing but an idea scribbled on a napkin. One night, after yet another over-the-top tech gala, Dylan returned to his sleek Palo Alto apartment alone. Melissa had left early. Early call time for a photo shoot, she'd said. The silence pressed in. He poured himself a drink and drifted toward the massive windows, the Silicon Valley skyline twinkling below. We did it, Nat, he murmured to his reflection, raising his glass in a half-hearted toast. For a moment he could almost see her beside him, arms crossed, eyes thoughtful, pride and pragmatism interwoven in her expression. The moment shattered as his phone buzzed. Great party tonight, babe. Can't wait to see what you conquer next. He stared at the message, a wave of emptiness washing over him. He had it all, didn't he? Success, freedom, a beautiful young girlfriend. A company poised to explode in the biggest tech market in the world. So why did it all feel so hollow? Across the valley, in her much humbler home in Austin, Natalie faced her own reckoning. Dylan's betrayal, the affair, the attempted erasure of her role in Green Rise, had cut deep. There were days when the weight of it all threatened to crush her, when she wanted nothing more than to pull the covers over her head and disappear. But she didn't. With every small win, Every new ally, every battle fought, an inch reclaimed, Natalie grew stronger. She began to rediscover parts of herself she hadn't seen in years. Her sharp strategic mind, her passion for innovation, her unwavering belief in the mission. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for a new community garden initiative she'd quietly nurtured for months, she caught her reflection in the office window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Gone was the quiet, self-effacing partner she had allowed herself to become. In her place stood a leader, composed, commanding, purposeful. "Welcome back," she whispered to her reflection. A small, confident smile played on her lips. As the weeks turned into months, the legal and business turbulence surrounding Greenrise Innovations only deepened. Dylan's aggressive push into Silicon Valley had stretched the company's finances to the brink, and murmurs of unease began to circulate among shareholders. The sparkle of his public image was losing its luster. Meanwhile, Natalie, armed with her deep knowledge of the company's inner workings, quietly began to reposition herself as the voice of reason during board meetings. She asked pointed, well-timed questions about the long-term viability of Dylan's strategies. She presented measured alternatives, scalable, fiscally responsible plans that balanced innovation with stability. And always, she framed her input as being in the best interest of Greenrise's future. The legal dispute over her ownership escalated in parallel. Dylan's lawyers claimed that while Natalie's contributions had been significant, they didn't warrant equal ownership. Her legal team countered with a meticulous mountain of evidence, meeting notes, financial records, strategic documents, all proving her role in every major development since Greenrise's inception. Throughout the ordeal, Natalie found an unlikely ally. Janet Holbrook, the sharp-eyed board member who had first taken notice of her when she asserted her stake. One afternoon, after another draining legal session, Janet caught her in the hallway. "You know," Janet said, "I've been in this game a long time. I've seen my share of ugly divorces and executive backstabbing. But I've got to hand it to you, Natalie. You're handling this with more grace and strategic precision than most CEOs I've met." Natalie smiled, touched by the comment. "Thank you, Janet. I've had a lot of time to think about what I want, what this company needs. This isn't about revenge, or even just what's mine. It's about bringing Greenrise back to its roots, creating real, sustainable change." Janet nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you've got me in your corner, and you're earning more support than you probably realize." That conversation stayed with Natalie in the days that followed, fueling her focus. She doubled down, no longer just defending her place, but shaping the company's future. She led a series of initiatives that revived Greenrise's public standing and mission. An educational partnership with local Austin schools to build urban gardens, a pilot program targeting food deserts with modular vertical farms, a research collaboration exploring next-generation hydroponic systems. Every success chipped away at Dylan's narrative. Each headline, each community win, each internal win. The idea that he alone had driven Greenrise forward was losing traction. One crisp winter evening, Natalie sat alone in her office, poring over the latest financial reports. The data was sobering. Dylan's Silicon Valley bet was crumbling. The expansion had overextended the company. Expenses outpaced projections, and the big-name investors Dylan had promised hadn't materialized. Greenrise was sliding toward a crisis. But Natalie saw something else buried in the numbers, a path forward. A chance to save the company and refocus it on its original mission. And she had the perfect plan to do it. She leaned back, a slow, confident smile curling across her lips. Years spent as the unseen force behind the curtain, balancing budgets, smoothing operations, letting Dylan have the spotlight, had prepared her for this moment. She reached for her phone and dialed without hesitation. "Sarah, it's time. Call the board. We're making our move." As she hung up, her pulse raced with a mix of nerves and exhilaration. It was time. The past few months had tested Natalie in ways she never could have predicted. It had been a crucible of pressure, pain, and persistence, and she had emerged from it forged stronger, more confident, more resolute. Her eyes flicked to the framed photo on her desk, her and Dylan grinning side by side in the early days of Greenrise. For a brief moment, a wave of melancholy passed over her. They had shared something once, a vision, a dream. But dreams evolve, and sometimes they part ways. Thank you, she whispered to the younger version of herself, smiling in the photo. For believing in the dream, even when you didn't yet believe in your own worth. She touched the frame gently. It's my turn now. Natalie stood, gathering her materials, reports, projections, proposals, her mind already running through the pitch she would deliver to the board. She had the data, the strategy, the leadership vision to not only stabilize Greenrise, but to take it to unprecedented heights. As she walked out of her office, head held high, she knew this wasn't just a milestone for her. It was the beginning of a new chapter, for the company she had poured her soul into. Tomorrow's board meeting would be her moment, her arrival. And Dylan had no idea. Natalie's trump card was ready to play, and the future of Greenrise Innovations teetered on the edge of transformation. The cool Austin night air wrapped around her as she stepped out of the office building. She paused, inhaling deeply, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. Tomorrow would change everything. But tonight, she gave herself this brief moment of quiet satisfaction. She had survived the storm. Faced down betrayal, unearthed strength she didn't know she had. Whatever happened tomorrow, one truth was crystal clear. She was ready. Ready to lead. Ready to disrupt. Ready to show the world exactly who Natalie Parker was. As she drove home, city lights blurred past the windshield, glittering threads of progress and promise. She felt a strange peace settle into her chest. The journey had been brutal, full of heartbreak, self-doubt. But it had also been transformative. She was no longer the woman who once stood quietly in Dylan Hughes's shadow. She was Natalie Parker, co-founder, strategist, and the rightful leader of Greenrise Innovations. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the world would know it too. The morning sun cast sharp beams through the glass walls of Greenrise headquarters as Natalie Parker strode across the gleaming lobby. Her heels struck the tile with precision and purpose. Employees turned to look. Eyes followed her path. Whispers flickered in her wake. The air hummed with anticipation. Everyone knew today's board meeting would change everything. Natalie's expression betrayed none of the adrenaline coursing through her. She had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering data, building her case, lining up allies. As she approached the boardroom, Sarah fell into step beside her. "Ready?" she asked, her voice low. Natalie nodded, a small but steady smile forming on her lips. "More than ready. It's time." They stepped into the boardroom together. The room buzzed with low, tense energy. Board members clustered in quiet groups, murmuring in tight circles. Conversations halted as soon as they entered. At the head of the table stood Dylan. His trademark smile was there, but brittle, forced. He stiffened slightly as Natalie took her seat across from him. She caught Janet Holbrook's eye. The veteran board member gave her the faintest of nods, steady, supportive. Natalie felt a rush of gratitude for the unexpected ally. Dylan called the meeting to order, his voice chipper, rehearsed. "Good morning, everyone. We've got a packed agenda today, so let's get started. As you know, our Silicon Valley expansion." "Actually, Dylan," Natalie cut in, her tone calm and unwavering, "there's a more urgent matter we need to address first." Every head turned. Tension rippled across the room. Curiosity, caution, apprehension. Dylan blinked, his smile flickered. "Natalie, I'm sure whatever it is can wait. We've got a full schedule." "It can't," she said firmly, rising to her feet. "What I'm about to share will fundamentally impact the future direction of Greenrise, and it's essential that the board understands the full picture before making any further decisions." She inhaled. This was it. "Members of the board, I'm here today to formally assert my rightful position as an equal partner in Greenrise Innovations with 50% ownership." The room erupted into stunned gasps and hurried whispers. Papers rustled, eyebrows shot up. Across the table, Dylan's face went pale, his expression twisted in disbelief. "What the hell are you talking about?" he barked, voice sharp with panic. "This is absurd." Natalie remained composed, letting her gaze pass evenly over the room. "I know this may be a surprise to many of you," she said, "but I assure you, this is entirely legal and fully documented." She nodded at Sarah, who immediately began handing out neatly organized packets to the board. "In these folders, you'll find comprehensive evidence of my role in building Greenrise since day one. Financials, strategy memos, patent filings, internal communications, each bearing my name, each proving my integral involvement." Board members flipped through the folders. Some frowned, some leaned in, scanning the fine print. Others exchanged looks of dawning realization. Natalie continued, her voice strong and even. But perhaps most importantly, please turn to page 12. A pause, the soft shuffle of pages. There, you'll find details of a significant private investment made 3 years ago. One that saved this company from the brink of collapse and allowed us to begin our first major expansion. Janet looked up, her gaze piercing. This investment, it came from you personally? Natalie nodded. Yes, an inheritance from my father. I invested it in what I believed was our shared dream. And as outlined in the legal documentation you now have, that investment granted me 50% ownership of Greenrise. The silence that followed was total. Dylan stood frozen, his jaw clenched, knuckles white against the polished table. Finally he spoke, his voice low, tight with disbelief. This is ridiculous. Dylan sputtered, voice rising. You can't just walk in here and claim half the company. I built Greenrise from the ground up. We built it, Natalie corrected him, her tone firm but not cruel. Every late night, every breakthrough, every failure, every win, we faced them together. I may have let you be the face of the company, but make no mistake, Greenrise is as much my creation as it is yours. From the far side of the table, Richard, a longtime supporter of Dylan's, cleared his throat. These are serious allegations, Miss Parker, he said carefully. If what you're saying is true, why come forward now? Why not assert your role sooner? Natalie drew a slow breath. She knew this answer mattered more than anything else she'd said today. Frankly, gentlemen, I believed in the partnership Dylan and I had built, both personally and professionally. I was content to stay behind the scenes, supporting a vision I thought we shared. She glanced briefly at Dylan before continuing. But recent events made it clear that our paths have diverged. When Dylan asked for a divorce and attempted to push me out of the company entirely, I realized I had a responsibility to myself, to this board, to our investors and our employees, to the communities we serve. I could no longer stay silent. Her words echoed into a sudden stillness. Across from her, Dylan's face darkened, anger and embarrassment clashing in his expression. Finally, he erupted. This is blackmail, he snapped. You're trying to bully your way into power? You don't deserve this. I'll fight you in court if I have to. Janet Holbrook's voice cut clean through the tension like a blade. I don't think that would be wise, Mr. Hughes. These documents appear to be in order. A court battle would only destabilize the company further. She turned to Natalie. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Parker? Natalie straightened. Her voice rang clear and unwavering. I'm exercising my legal right as equal partner to have a say in the company's leadership. I propose a restructuring of the executive team, with myself stepping in as co-CEO. My focus will be on long-term strategy and sustainable innovation. She turned now to the full board. Greenrise is at a crossroads. The Silicon Valley expansion, while bold, has depleted our resources and pulled us away from our core mission, reshaping urban agriculture. I have a plan, concrete, data-driven, to realign our focus, reduce unnecessary spending, and drive sustainable growth. She handed out updated binders, each one filled with her proposed restructuring model, financial forecasts, and strategic roadmaps. As Natalie spoke, she could feel the momentum shift. Board members who had entered the meeting wary or unconvinced were now leaning in, nodding, flipping through her materials with genuine interest. Dylan, seeing control slipping through his fingers, made one last grasp. This is all very polished, Natalie, but let's be real. You can't seriously expect to run a company of this size. It takes experience. It takes… What, Dylan? Natalie cut in smoothly, her tone razor-sharp. Her voice cut through the room, clear, sharp. An intimate knowledge of our operations, strategic foresight, financial discipline. I've demonstrated all of those things today, and I've been demonstrating them for years. The only difference now? She continued, her gaze locking onto Dylan. I'm finally doing it in the open, instead of letting you take credit for my work. Then she turned her attention back to the board, her tone softening. I'm not here to tear down what we've built. I believe in Greenrise and its ability to truly change the world. But to do that, we have to course correct, return to our roots, innovation, sustainability, purpose. And we need leadership that values long-term vision, not just short-term headlines. As the meeting wore on, it became clear that Natalie's strategy was working. Board members launched into questions, sharp, precise, and she met every one of them head-on with calm authority and deep knowledge. Even Dylan's most loyal supporters began to waver, shifting in their seats as the undeniable truth of her role came into focus. Dylan saw it happening, saw the tides turning, and panic set in. During a brief recess, he cornered her near the window, his voice low and strained. "You can't do this," he hissed. "Think about everything we've been through, everything we built together. Are you really going to throw it all away?" Natalie didn't flinch. "I'm not throwing anything away, Dylan," she said evenly. "I'm salvaging what's left of our dream, the real dream. Not this Silicon Valley fantasy you've been chasing. You're the one who walked away. From us. From this company." When the meeting reconvened, the energy in the room had shifted. Board members who once leaned Dylan's way now looked at Natalie with respect, even admiration. Janet Holbrook, who had remained silent for much of the discussion, finally spoke. "I think we have a great deal to consider," she said, her eyes sweeping across the board. "Miss Parker has presented not only compelling evidence of her foundational role in Greenrise, but also a clear strategic vision for its future." She turned to Dylan. "Mr. Hughes, your contributions are not in question, but it appears we've been making decisions with an incomplete understanding of this company's leadership." She paused, her voice turning firm. "I move that we adjourn for the day to review everything that's been presented. We'll reconvene tomorrow to vote on Ms. Parker's restructuring proposal and determine the path forward for Greenrise Innovations." The motion was quickly seconded and passed. As the meeting broke up, Natalie was approached by several board members, offering kind words, questions, suggestions, encouragement. Dylan, meanwhile, stood alone at the far end of the table. Still, tight-jawed, eyes burning. As Natalie walked out, flanked by Sarah and Janet, she caught snippets of whispered conversations. Didn't realize how involved she was. Her grasp of the numbers is impressive. Maybe this is exactly what we need to stabilize. Her heart soared. But she knew the battle wasn't over. Not yet. As they reached the elevators, Dylan's voice echoed from behind. "This isn't over, Natalie," he called out, equal parts warning and plea. "You can't just walk in here and take everything." "I've worked for this," Natalie said, turning to face her ex-husband, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing beneath it. "I'm not taking anything from you, Dylan. I'm reclaiming my place in the company we built together." She let the words hang between them, firm but not cruel. "The choice is yours. We can work together to make Greenrise stronger than ever. Or you can fight me and risk losing everything." As the elevator doors slid closed, she caught a flicker in Dylan's eyes. Fear, maybe, or perhaps the first dawning realization of just how much he had to lose. The next 24 hours were a blur. Natalie fielded calls from investors and strategic partners, calmly and clearly outlining the situation. She reassured them of Greenrise's stability, emphasizing her long-standing role in operations and her plan for sustainable growth. She met with key employees, listening, answering questions, and sharing her vision. Her presence, once quiet and behind the scenes, was now confident and front and center. Dylan, meanwhile, was noticeably absent. Rumors swirled. Some said he was pacing the parking lot, yelling into his phone. Others whispered that he'd holed himself up with lawyers, refusing to see anyone. His meetings were canceled. His door remained closed. As the hour of the reconvened board meeting approached, Natalie felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened next, she knew she had done everything in her power to protect the company she had helped create. The boardroom was heavy with tension. No light banter, no small talk, only silence, broken by the occasional rustle of paper or click of a pen. Everyone understood the stakes. Natalie took her seat. Dylan arrived last. His typically sleek appearance was slightly rumpled. He avoided eye contact, a manila folder clutched tightly in one hand. Janet Holbrook called the meeting to order, her voice measured but resolute. "Before we move to a vote," she said, "does anyone wish to make a final statement?" Dylan stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the hardwood. "I do," he said hoarsely. "I've spent the night consulting with my legal team, and I want it on record that I contest the validity of Miss Parker's claim to 50% ownership. I intend to challenge it in court if necessary." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Natalie's stomach tightened. A court battle could drag on for months, maybe years, and could shake investor confidence, derail growth, and inflict irreparable harm. But before she could speak, another voice interrupted. Richard, the board member who had always backed Dylan, cleared his throat. "Dylan," he said softly but firmly, "I don't think that's wise." He tapped the folder in front of him. "I've reviewed everything Natalie submitted. The documents appear airtight. Legally, ethically, it's all there. A court battle would only damage the company and your own reputation." Dylan's face flushed. A storm of anger, disbelief, and betrayal flashed in his eyes. "You too, Richard?" Dylan snapped, disbelief tightening his voice. "This isn't about loyalty, Dylan," Richard replied, cutting him off. "It's about what's best for Greenrise. And right now, that means recognizing Natalie's contributions and working with her to move this company forward." A soft murmur of agreement spread across the table. Dylan looked around, frantic for any sign of support, but all he found were solemn, resolved faces. And in that moment, something in him broke. The fire, the resistance, it drained out of him. He collapsed into his chair, suddenly looking older and smaller than Natalie had ever seen him. Janet didn't miss a beat. "If there are no further comments," she said, seizing the momentum, "we'll proceed with the vote. The motion on the table is to restructure the executive team, appointing Ms. Parker as co-CEO, responsible for strategy and sustainable innovation." "All in favor?" Hands rose. Some shot up immediately. Others, slower but deliberate. In the end, the outcome was undeniable. The motion passed by overwhelming majority. A quiet exhale swept the room. The pressure broke. Board members began to move, some offering handshakes and congratulations to Natalie, others approaching Dylan with quiet condolences. Natalie crossed the room and stopped in front of him. "Dylan," she said gently. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed, his expression dazed. "I meant what I said yesterday," she continued. "We built this company together. We can still do something great, but only if you're willing." For a brief second, she saw the man she once loved, raw, bright-eyed, idealistic. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, voice low. "Not yet. I need some time." Natalie nodded. "Take it, but remember, Greenrise needs both of us. When you're ready, we've got work to do." She turned to go. "Nat," Dylan's voice stopped her at the door. She turned. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything." The words hit her like a gust, long overdue and heavy with regret. "I know," she replied softly. "So am I." As she stepped out of the boardroom, Natalie felt a swell of emotions. Relief, triumph, and a bittersweet ache for everything that had been lost. But rising above it all was one clear feeling. Purpose. The battle was over. Now, the real work could begin. Greenrise Innovations stood at a crossroads, and Natalie was ready to lead it into a bold new era. An era of innovation, of sustainability, of shared success. She entered her new office, no longer behind the curtain, but at the center of it all, where she belonged. The view of Austin stretched before her, a city alive with potential, a symbol of where they had started, and the community they had vowed to serve. Sarah appeared in the doorway, a grin stretching across her face. "Congratulations, boss," she said warmly. Natalie smiled. "Thanks." "What's our first move?" Natalie turned to her friend, her ally, a spark ignited in her eyes. "First," she echoed. "We remind the world what Greenrise stands for. We go back to our roots and then grow further than we ever thought possible." As they dove into the next chapter, Natalie felt it fully, her purpose, her power, her time. Energy coursed through her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Repairing internal damage, regaining trust, realigning focus, realigning focus. But for the first time in years, Natalie felt truly, completely alive. She had reclaimed her voice, her vision, her rightful seat at the table. And she was ready to lead Greenrise Innovations into a future more promising than she'd ever dared imagine. Outside, the sun dipped low, washing Austin's skyline in hues of amber and rose. It was a new day, for the company and for Natalie Parker. The next chapter was beginning, and she couldn't wait to see where it would take her. The Texas sun blazed down on Greenrise Innovations headquarters, its sleek glass facade reflecting the boundless blue above. Inside, the air buzzed with equal parts anticipation and anxiety. It had been 6 months since Natalie's dramatic return and appointment as co-CEO. And today, Greenrise was poised to unveil its most ambitious initiative yet. But Natalie stood quietly at the window of her office, gazing out over the city she now called home. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of transformation. She had thrown herself into her role with a fierce resolve, redefining priorities, pushing the envelope in sustainable urban agriculture, and realigning Greenrise with the purpose it had once promised. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Sarah entered, tablet in hand, a grin lighting up her face. "Final numbers are in from the beta test," she said. "We're good to go." Natalie's heart leapt. "That's fantastic news. Let's gather the team," she added. "Final briefing before we go live." As they made their way to the main conference room, Natalie's thoughts wandered to how far she and the company had come. The transformation hadn't been easy. In the early weeks after the board's decision, she had met resistance. Some employees, loyal to Dylan's leadership style, doubted her. Investors eyed the leadership shakeup with suspicion. But Natalie had met each challenge head-on. She'd implemented an open-door policy, welcoming feedback from every level of the company. Her strategic mind, combined with years of operational knowledge, silenced skeptics quickly. Under her leadership, Greenrise rediscovered its soul. They returned to their roots, urban sustainability, while expanding into exciting new territory. A successful consumer line brought vertical farming into everyday homes, and major city partnerships turned abandoned lots into productive green hubs. As Natalie entered the conference room, now filled with the brilliant minds who had rallied behind her vision, she felt a powerful surge of pride. This wasn't just growth, this was purpose. This was impact. "All right, team," she said, her voice steady and bright. Conspicuously absent from the celebration was Dylan. In the months following the board's decision, he had struggled to find his footing. At first, there was fury, threats of legal action, angry messages left unreturned. But that had quickly given way to something else: silence, withdrawal. He had taken a formal leave of absence from Greenrise, and his disappearance sparked no shortage of rumors. Natalie heard things, bits and pieces, passed along by mutual contacts. His relationship with Melissa had unraveled under the weight of professional collapse. The fast-talking friends who had orbited his success like moths to a flame, gone the moment things turned dark. Roughly 3 months after Natalie's appointment as co-CEO, Dylan had reached out. Just a message, asking to meet. Coffee. Neutral ground. The cafe was unfamiliar, far from their usual spots. When he walked in, Natalie barely recognized him. The crisp charm was gone, just replaced by something quieter. Worn. Honest. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said, barely above a whisper. "About us, about the company, about everything. I was wrong, Nat, about all of it, and I'm sorry." Natalie had listened. Her emotions were tangled. Resentment, empathy, disbelief, a surprising sadness. A part of her wanted to forgive, to comfort. But the deeper, steadier part of her knew that too much had shifted. There was no going back. "I appreciate that," she'd said, her voice even. "And I want you to know, I don't hate you. What you did, it hurt. But in a strange way, it freed me. It forced me to become the person I should have been all along." Dylan had nodded, eyes full of regret. "You're amazing, Natalie. I see that now. I just wish." He didn't finish, but Natalie understood. Wishes couldn't rewrite the past. They could only shape the future. "What are you planning to do now?" she'd asked gently. He sat up straighter then, a flicker of resolve returning to his voice. "I want to come back. Not to what we had, that's gone, I know, but to this, the company, the mission, what we started. If you'll let me, I want to help make Greenrise what we always dreamed it could be." She hadn't answered immediately. "It won't be easy," she finally said. "There's a lot of trust to rebuild, not just with me, with everyone." "I know," Dylan had replied. "I'm willing to earn it, however long it takes." And so they'd made a new kind of agreement. Dylan would return, but in a more limited role. He'd focus on special projects, leveraging his connections and vision in ways that supported Natalie's leadership without undermining it. Final decisions still rested with her and the board. It hadn't been easy. Old wounds reopened, tension flared, but slowly, carefully, a new dynamic began to form. Not a partnership. Not the partnership they'd once had, but something else, a professional respect. Rooted in shared history, strengthened by a common goal. Natalie's thoughts were interrupted by Sarah's voice. "Nat, it's time." Natalie inhaled deeply, then stood. "All right, team, let's go change the world." The press conference was held in the glass atrium of Greenrise HQ, a space fully transformed by the very innovation they were about to unveil. Vertical gardens climbed every wall, a living mosaic of green, dotted with ripening vegetables and blooming herbs. The air was fresh, earthy, alive. Far from the stale sterility of most corporate events, this room pulsed with possibility. As Natalie stepped up to the podium, cameras flashed. Conversations faded. The room hushed. She scanned the crowd, familiar faces, curious new ones. And then in the back, partly hidden behind a tall planter of cascading basil, she saw him. Dylan. Their eyes met. Just briefly. He gave a small nod. She nodded back. "Good afternoon," Natalie began, her voice sure and steady. "Thank you for being here. At Greenrise, we've always believed that the solution to some of humanity's greatest challenges, food insecurity, climate instability, urban neglect, starts with rethinking our connection to nature and to technology." She gestured to the vertical walls around them. "What you see here today is more than a design feature. It's a preview of what's possible. A future where every building becomes a source of fresh, healthy food, where access to nutrition is not limited by income or zip code." She introduced their latest initiative, an advanced urban farming platform that blended vertical gardening, AI-assisted hydroponics, and climate control technology. The response was electric. Journalists scribbled notes. Investors leaned forward, eyes wide. But it was the group near the back, teachers, nonprofit leaders, community garden reps, whose reactions meant the most. They didn't see dollar signs. They saw opportunity, hope, transformation. And that was the legacy Natalie had always wanted for Greenrise. When the Q&A opened, the questions flew. Technical specs, market reach, global potential, scalability. Natalie handled each one with precision and clarity. No fluff, no jargon, just confidence backed by vision and expertise. As the event began to wind down, a flood of congratulatory handshakes and eager proposals circled her. Partnership opportunities, media requests, seed funding offers. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Dylan again, hovering near the exit, hands in his pockets. There was pride in his expression, and something else. Regret? Gratitude? Maybe both. Later that night, after the building had gone quiet and the last champagne glass had been cleared away, Natalie sat alone in her office. Not the partnership they'd once had, but something else. A professional respect, rooted in shared history, strengthened by a common goal. Natalie's thoughts were interrupted by Sarah's voice. "Nat, it's time." Natalie inhaled deeply, then stood. "All right, team, let's go change the world." The press conference was held in the glass atrium of Greenrise HQ, a space fully transformed by the very innovation they were about to unveil. Vertical gardens climbed every wall, a living mosaic of green dotted with ripening vegetables and blooming herbs. The air was fresh, earthy, alive. Far from the stale sterility of most corporate events, this room pulsed with possibility. As Natalie stepped up to the podium, cameras flashed. Conversations faded. The room hushed. She scanned the crowd, familiar faces, curious new ones. And then, in the back, partly hidden behind a tall planter of cascading basil, she saw him. Dylan. Their eyes met. Just briefly. He gave a small nod. She nodded back. "Good afternoon," Natalie began, her voice sure and steady. "Thank you for being here. At Greenrise, we've always believed that the solution to some of humanity's greatest challenges, food insecurity, climate instability, urban neglect, starts with rethinking our connection to nature and to technology." She gestured to the vertical walls around them. "What you see here today is more than a design feature. It's a preview of what's possible. A future where every building becomes a source of fresh, healthy food, where access to nutrition is not limited by income or zip code." She introduced their latest initiative, an advanced urban farming platform that blended vertical gardening, AI-assisted hydroponics, and climate control technology. The response was electric. Journalists scribbled notes. Investors leaned forward, eyes wide. But it was the group near the back, teachers, nonprofit leaders, community garden reps, whose reactions meant the most. They didn't see dollar signs. They saw opportunity, hope, transformation. And that was the legacy Natalie had always wanted for Greenrise. When the Q&A opened, the questions flew. Technical specs, market reach, global potential, scalability. Natalie handled each one with precision and clarity. No fluff, no jargon, just confidence backed by vision and expertise. As the event began to wind down, a flood of congratulatory handshakes and eager proposals circled her. partnership opportunities, media requests, seed funding offers. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted Dylan again, hovering near the exit, hands in his pockets. There was pride in his expression, and something else. Regret? Gratitude? Maybe both. Later that night, after the building had gone quiet and the last champagne glass had been cleared away, Natalie sat alone in her office. Finally, Dylan spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Natalie, for everything, for how I treated you, the things I said. I was blind, arrogant, and I regret it all, deeply." Tears slipped down Natalie's cheeks. "I know," she said softly, "and I forgive you." She swallowed, then added, "I hope you can forgive me too, for the pain I caused." Dylan hesitated, then reached out, his touch gentle as he wiped a tear from her cheek. "There's nothing to forgive," he said quietly. "You were always the best of us." They stood there, bathed in the last fading light of the day. A chapter, once so tangled, finally closed. But it wasn't sadness Natalie felt, it was peace. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now. "So, when do you leave?" Dylan straightened, a hint of purpose settling into his posture. 2 weeks. I've given the board my notice. Then I'm off to Tanzania. My first project starts there." Natalie nodded, mind briefly flickering with the logistics she'd tackle tomorrow. But for tonight, she pushed those thoughts aside. "We should celebrate," she said suddenly, a spark lighting her eyes. "Your new beginning. Continued beginning, I guess." Dylan raised a brow. "Yeah? What did you have in mind?" A grin spread across her face. "Remember that little dive bar we used to go to when Green Rise was just an idea? The one with the world's worst karaoke?" Dylan laughed, freely, genuinely. "God, how could I forget? You think it's still around? Only one way to find out." She grabbed her purse. "Come on, for old time's sake, one last hurrah for the original Green Rise team." As they walked out, bickering good-naturedly about who had butchered believing worse back in the day, Natalie felt something loosen inside her. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities. Green Rise Innovations was thriving, poised to change the way the world grew food. She had reclaimed her voice, her power, her identity. And now, she and Dylan had found a way to honor what they once were, while stepping boldly into who they were becoming. Outside, Austin's night air wrapped around them. Natalie drew in a breath, savoring the quiet, the closure, the freedom. Tomorrow would bring new hurdles, new victories, new ideas. But tonight was for celebration, for forgiveness, for new beginnings. The karaoke bar was improbably still there. They stepped through its doors into a world of off-key vocals, warm lights, and laughter that vibrated the walls. They found a corner table, ordered beers and greasy nachos like they had in the early days when $10 meant splitting dinner and still being broke. As they laughed, reminisced, and spoke of the futures they were carving, apart, yet somehow still connected, Natalie felt gratitude settle deep in her bones. The road had been long, winding, sometimes brutal, but it led her here, to purpose, to strength, to herself. And to her surprise, she felt gratitude for Dylan too. Not just for the dreams they once chased, but for the failures that taught her how to rise, for the heartbreak that ultimately set her free. "You know," Dylan said, his voice low but warm, "I'm really proud of you, Nat, and I'm proud we built this, together." Natalie smiled. "I am too." Turning serious for a moment, Dylan glanced sideways at her. "I've always wondered, back in the boardroom that day you laid everything out, when you could have completely destroyed me. Why didn't you?" Natalie paused, taking a slow sip of her beer before answering. "I guess because that's not who I am, and it's not what Green Rise stands for." She looked at him, calm and clear-eyed. "We started this company to make the world better, remember? Tearing you down wouldn't have served that purpose." Dylan nodded slowly, something like admiration flickering in his expression. "You're a better person than I am, Nat. Always have been." She shook her head, a soft smile curving her lips. "Not better, just different. We both had lessons to learn." As the night wore on, they found themselves, almost inevitably, pulled toward the karaoke stage. The allure of cheesy 80s power ballads was too strong to resist. Their duet of Don't Stop Believin' was every bit as atrocious as they remembered, and perfect. As they laughed through the final chorus, Natalie felt something she hadn't in a long time: pure joy. This was the hidden gift buried within the past year's chaos. The ability to laugh freely again, to find joy. to embrace life in all its messy, imperfect beauty. When they finally stumbled out of the bar just after 2 a.m., still buzzing from laughter and beer and too many off-key harmonies, Dylan turned to her. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft, "for tonight, for all of it. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness or your friendship, but I'm grateful for it anyway." Natalie squeezed his arm gently. "We both deserved a proper goodbye and a chance to remember the good times." They stood in silence for a beat, then parted, each heading to their own life, their own tomorrow. And for the first time in a long time, Natalie felt at peace. That chapter of her life, the one tied so tightly to Dylan, was ending. But her story, and the story of Green Rise, was far from over. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Dylan's departure set off a reshuffle of roles, meetings, and logistics to ensure a clean handoff. But beneath the surface, something unexpected took shape, a new dynamic between them. Freed from the weight of the past, they worked together with surprising ease. No illusions, no tension, just mutual respect and shared history. On Dylan's last day, the Greenrise team gathered in the rooftop garden for a farewell. The atmosphere was bittersweet, an era closing, but the horizon wide open with promise. Natalie watched as Dylan made his rounds, hugging old teammates, offering parting wisdom, laughing at inside jokes one last time. When it came time for remarks, she stepped up to the podium, her heart full. "Dylan," she began, her voice strong but warm, "when we started Greenrise, we were just two idealists with a shared vision, and not much else. We wanted to make the world greener, more sustainable. And while our personal journey took some unexpected turns, that mission, it never wavered." She met his gaze across the room. "You're leaving Greenrise, but you're taking that dream with you, and the work you'll be doing in Tanzania and beyond, that's the truest expression of what we set out to do all those years ago." "I'm proud of you, Dylan," Natalie said, her voice steady, "and I know you'll keep making a difference, wherever your path takes you." As applause swelled throughout the room, Dylan stepped up to the podium. He pulled Natalie into an embrace, whispering, "Thank you for everything," before turning to face the crowd. "I stand here today with a heart full of gratitude," he began, emotion thick in his voice. "Gratitude for the lessons I've learned, the opportunities I've been given, and most of all, for the incredible people I've worked with." He turned to Natalie, his eyes shining. "But especially for Natalie," he said, "you were always the heart and soul of Greenrise. I just didn't see it clearly until now. The company couldn't be in better hands. I can't wait to see how you'll continue to change the world." As the party wound down and team members began filtering out, Natalie and Dylan found themselves alone in the office they once shared. They stood quietly at the window, gazing out over the glowing Austin skyline. "So," Natalie said at last, "this is it." Dylan nodded, a bittersweet smile on his face. "It is. New beginnings for both of us." "You'll keep in touch?" she asked, surprised by how much she meant it. "Of course," Dylan grinned. "Someone's got to keep you updated on the karaoke scene in Tanzania." They laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls, warm and familiar. As they prepared to part, Dylan hesitated. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. "I wanted to give you this," he said. "Don't open it until I'm gone, okay?" Natalie nodded, curious but honoring his request. They embraced one final, lingering hug, not out of longing but acknowledgement of the years, the growth, the good, the bad, and everything between. "Goodbye, Dylan," she whispered. "Good luck out there." "Goodbye, Nat," he replied, "and thank you." His footsteps echoed down the hall until they faded into silence. Natalie turned back to the window, the envelope suddenly heavy in her hands. After a few moments, she opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter. "Dear Natalie, by the time you read this, I'll be en route to Tanzania. I've written and rewritten this letter a dozen times, trying to find the right words. In the end, I think it comes down to this. I'm sorry. I'm grateful. And I'm in awe of you." Natalie blinked away tears as she read on. Dylan's words were raw, heartfelt, acknowledging his mistakes, honoring her strength, and expressing hope for the future. The final lines hit hardest. "Letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life, not just personally, but professionally. You were always the true visionary. I was lucky to be part of it for a while. You're going to change the world in ways we never dreamed of, and I'll be cheering you on every step of the way." All my of Dylan, Natalie folded the letter gently, brushing away a tear. The emotions were complex: sorrow for what had been lost, gratitude for what they'd built, and above all, a quiet determination for what lay ahead. She turned once more to the window, eyes fixed on the city she now called home. Greenrise had begun as a shared dream between two young idealists. Now it was hers, to lead, to grow, to change the world. The responsibility was daunting, but for the first time in a long time, Natalie Parker felt completely ready for the challenge. As the sun dipped below the horizon in Austin, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and pink, she allowed herself a moment to dream about what lay ahead. Greenrise reaching new cities, forming new partnerships, pushing boundaries in sustainable tech. And somewhere, Dylan would be doing the same, in his own way. Their paths had diverged, but the vision they once shared still lived on. Natalie took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she would raise a glass to the journey. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Hey Sarah, feel like grabbing a drink?" she said, a grin in her voice. "I think it's time we start planning our next big move." Gathering her bag, she paused at the office door and looked back one last time. There were so many memories etched in the walls of this space, and now it was time to make new ones. With a small smile, she flicked off the lights and stepped into the hallway. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Natalie felt the flutter of excitement rise inside her. The future was unwritten, wide open, full of possibilities she was only beginning to imagine, and she couldn't wait to meet it head-on. When she stepped out into the warm Texas night, Natalie Parker, entrepreneur, innovator, leader, took a deep breath of summer air. The world was waiting, and she was ready. The story of Greenrise Innovations was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. 5 years later, the skyline of downtown Austin had changed. Glass and steel climbed higher into the sky, but no building shone brighter, figuratively and literally, than the new Greenrise headquarters, now a landmark in the city center. The structure was wrapped in vertical gardens, solar panels, and reclaimed materials, a beacon of what sustainable urban architecture could be. Natalie Parker, now an internationally recognized force in sustainable innovation, stood at the top floor window of her office, surveying the city she'd helped transform. Green rooftops dotted the landscape, city gardens filled abandoned spaces, food deserts had become lush urban oases. A soft knock pulled her from her reverie. "Come in," she called. Sarah entered, tablet in hand and a broad grin lighting her face. "Latest numbers from the Tokyo rollout just came in," she said, unable to hide her excitement. "We've exceeded every projection. The mayor is calling it a green revolution." Natalie beamed. "That's incredible," she said, pride swelling in her chest. This was why she'd fought so hard, not just for control, but for impact, for communities, for the planet. "Let's set up a call with the team to celebrate and start planning our next steps," Natalie said. Sarah nodded, already halfway out the door, and Natalie's gaze drifted to a framed magazine cover on her desk, Forbes. Her own face smiled back beneath a bold headline, "The Queen of Green, How Natalie Parker is Revolutionizing Urban Agriculture." It still felt surreal sometimes. The road to this moment had been long, twisting, uphill, and often lonely. But as she sat back in her chair and thought about the last 5 years, Natalie felt a deep-rooted sense of satisfaction. Greenrise had expanded far beyond her wildest dreams, with sustainable agriculture projects flourishing in cities across the globe. Their modular technology brought fresh, locally grown produce into the heart of urban food deserts, reducing carbon emissions and creating green jobs in communities that had once been overlooked. But more than professional triumph, it was the personal evolution that left Natalie feeling whole. She had confronted long-avoided fears, uncovered strength she never knew she had, and created a life that was fully, authentically hers. Her phone buzzed. An email. From Dylan. Their correspondence had become occasional but warm over the years, tethered by mutual respect and the remnants of shared history. She clicked it open. Subject: "Congratulations, dear Nat. I hope this email finds you well. I just saw your Forbes cover. Congratulations. It's no less than you deserve, and I couldn't be prouder of what you've accomplished with Greenrise. Life here in Tanzania continues to be challenging but incredibly fulfilling. The sustainable farming initiatives we've launched are transforming communities, Watching families thrive with food security and new opportunities, it never gets old. I also have some personal news. Remember Maria, the agronomist I mentioned a while back? We're getting married next month. It'll be small, just close friends and our team. But I wanted you to know, she sees me in ways I didn't think possible after us, and she pushes me to be better every day. I know it might be awkward, but if you're able, we'd love for you to come. You'll always be part of my story, Nat. It would mean a lot to have you there. All the best, Dylan. Natalie leaned back, letting the words settle. Her feelings were complex, but clear. Happiness. Dylan had found his path, just as she had. She smiled, genuinely. Then her eyes drifted to a plain manila folder on her desk, one she'd left unopened for days. It had come from a private investigator, someone she'd hired years ago during the chaos following the divorce, then nearly forgotten about. With a deep breath, Natalie opened it, and her pulse quickened. Inside was a detailed report, and buried in the findings was something unexpected. Proof that during the early days of Green Rise, Dylan had been involved in ethically murky activities. Nothing outright illegal, but certainly questionable. Misrepresented supplier agreements, omitted costs, deals struck in the shadows, stuff she'd never known, stuff he had hidden. Natalie closed the folder slowly. It didn't shake her. Not anymore. She was no longer the woman who had needed validation from someone else's truth. She'd built her own, steered her own ship. And though the contents of that file stung, they did not define Dylan today, or herself. He had made his peace, and so had she. With a steady hand, she slid the file into a locked drawer, exhaling slowly. The past had taught her many things, but the most important? It's not where you start. It's what you choose to do next. If Natalie's journey moved something in you, if her pain, perseverance, and growth reminded you of your own struggles, then maybe this story was meant to find you. Maybe, like her, you've stood at the edge of something uncertain, holding your breath, not knowing if the next step would break you or build you. Natalie's story isn't just about betrayal or ambition or redemption. It's about choosing who we become when the world doesn't go the way we planned. It's about learning, like the Stoics teach, that we don't control the storm, but we do control how we respond to it. And in that response, we find our power. So if you're navigating your own season of change, take heart. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Natalie's strength wasn't born in spite of hardship. It was forged through it. We share these stories not because they're perfect, but because they're real. If it spoke to you, consider subscribing. Not for algorithms, not for numbers, but because maybe, just maybe, you're looking for stories that remind you of who you are when everything else falls away. And if this story helped you, stay with us. There's more ahead. Stories of grit, of rising, of choosing the harder, more honest path. Because sometimes, that's the one that leads home.